For centuries, there was an object so dangerous that touching it meant instant death. No warning, no second chance, no exception for good intentions. And yet this object was not hidden away forever. It was carried, moved, taken into battle. Only one man on earth was allowed to stand before it. Only once a year, and even then, he entered knowing he might never come back out. Then one day, the object vanished. No wreckage, no records of capture, no trace of destruction. What kind of object behaves like this? Today, we are going to reconstruct the Ark of the Covenant. How it was built, how it was used, why it was lethal, and why it disappeared, not as myth, not as legend, but as a real object that existed in real history. Stay with me, because once you understand what the Ark truly was, you will understand why it could never survive in the modern world. The command to build the Ark came at the worst possible moment. Israel had just escaped Egypt after nearly 400 years of slavery. They were not engineers. They were not craftsmen. They were not architects. They were brickmakers. Now imagine the situation. No workshops, no metal tools, no measuring instruments, no infrastructure, just a nomadic camp in the middle of the desert, focused entirely on survival. And into this reality comes an instruction. Build a portable object with exact measurements, coated inside and out with pure gold, with no margin for error, not approximate dimensions, exact dimensions. A deviation of millimeters would invalidate the object. This was not just difficult, it was humanly impossible. And that is precisely why the command did not come from human planning. The instructions for the Ark were not suggestions. They were specifications, measurements, materials, assembly order. Nothing was left open to interpretation. Moses did not design the Ark, he transmitted it. There was no adaptation for desert conditions, no allowance for limited resources, no flexibility for error. The Ark demanded perfection in an environment that guaranteed imperfection. And that tells us something critical. This object was not meant to be improved over time. It had to be right the first time. Because once it was completed, it could not be corrected. The construction of the Ark was not distributed among the people. It was centralized. The responsibility was placed on one man, an artisan, not a priest, a technician, not a leader, a man skilled in wood, metal, gold, and precision work. He was assisted by one other specialist. That was it. No trial runs, no prototypes, no testing phase. Every cut had to be final. Every joint had to be exact. Every layer had to align perfectly. This was not communal craftsmanship. This was controlled execution, because the Ark did not forgive mistakes. Then came the next problem. Where do you find the materials? The Ark required large quantities of pure gold, durable wood, rare textiles. None of these existed naturally in the Sinai desert. The only reason the Ark could be built at all was because the Israelites left Egypt carrying Egyptian wealth. Gold, silver, fine fabrics. What seemed excessive during the escape became essential for survival in the desert. The wood was acacia, dense, pest-resistant, and extremely durable. Difficult to work with, heavy, unforgiving, perfect for something meant to last generations. At this point, the challenge stopped being logistical and became mathematical. Because every mistake meant permanent loss, there were no replacements. The Ark was defined by numbers, length, width, height, not symbolic numbers, functional ones. Without modern tools, ancient methods had to be pushed to their limit. Knotted ropes became rulers. Stone plumb lines ensured alignment. Every plank was planned before it was cut. Then came the most delicate phase, the gold overlay. Pure gold is soft, malleable, and easily damaged. It had to be hammered thin enough to adhere, yet strong enough to survive transport. The gold covered the Ark inside and out. Any exposed wood would compromise the object. By the time it was finished, the Ark weighed far more than two men could safely carry. And still, nothing about its design was decorative. Every detail had a function. When you analyze the Ark purely as a religious symbol, its design seems excessive. But when you analyze it physically, something unsettling appears. Gold on the outside, wood in the center. Gold on the inside. This is not a random combination. It is the basic structure of a conductor-insulator-conductor system. Gold is an excellent conductor. Dry acacia wood is a natural insulator. In a dry desert environment, static electricity accumulates easily, especially on metal surfaces under constant movement. The ark was transported repeatedly. If charge accumulated, the wooden core would prevent dissipation. The most sensitive point was the lid, two solid gold figures with raised wings facing one another. In modern terms, raised metallic points concentrate discharge. This does not replace the biblical explanation. It reinforces it. The rules were not symbolic. They were protective. The ark was not dangerous only because of its structure. It was dangerous because of its contents. Inside were three objects: the law, the legal foundation of the nation; authority, the confirmation of legitimate leadership; provision, evidence of survival beyond human means. Together, they formed something unique. Law, authority, sustenance, contained in one physical point. This was not storage. It was consolidation of power. The ark could not be touched. It could not be carried arbitrarily. Only specific people were authorized, only in a specific way. Wooden poles kept it isolated from human contact. When these rules were ignored, death was immediate, not punishment, consequence. In war, the ark was not a weapon. It was presence. Its visibility strengthened Israel's confidence and destabilized enemies, but it did not guarantee victory. When used without obedience, it led to disaster. The object remained powerful, but only within its limits. Once a year, something happened that dwarfed every battle. When man entered the most restricted space on earth, no witnesses, no help, no margin for error. He carried incense, not for ritual beauty, but for survival. A dense cloud had to cover the ark. Direct exposure was fatal. The ritual lasted minutes. If something went wrong, no one would enter to retrieve the body. This continued for centuries, until one day, it stopped. When Jerusalem fell, everything sacred was catalogued and taken. Everything except the ark. No mention of capture, no fragments, no record of destruction. The space where it stood was empty. The ark vanished before the invasion. Where it went remains unknown. And perhaps that is not the real mystery. The Ark of the Covenant was not dangerous because it contained uncontrolled power. It was dangerous because it operated within absolute limits. It could not be negotiated with. It could not be adapted. It could not be tested. When respected, it brought protection. When violated, it brought irreversible consequence. Perhaps that is why it disappeared. Not because it was lost, but because it could not exist in hands that no longer respected limits. And maybe the greatest question is this: if the Ark were found today, in a world that turns everything into an experiment, would we survive it? If this documentary gave you a new perspective, leave a comment with your thoughts. Subscribe for deeper explorations into biblical history beyond the surface, because some objects are not meant to be controlled, only understood.